you happy?
I'm encouraged. We can still do more. There's still lots of challenges in the sector, and just hope that we'll get some of these setbacks right. The most upsetting also is when communities hold kids away from school. So we still have lots of challenges, both from inside and outside. But it's encouraging just to see that in the midst of all the challenges, we're still able to make headways.
You were scathing about some of those Limpopo areas. What's your message to communities who feel they have a strong grievance?
Steady. I mean, it's not only Limpopo. In Northwest, there are schools where they kept learners for almost 6 months away from school. In Northern Cape, even when we were marking exams in the Kimberley area, there was no water, all sorts of disruptions which affect even their own children's education, and sometimes parents themselves. As I say, they called me to say, talk to your colleague, we're going to hold kids away from going to school. And I just find it extremely, extremely disappointing from parents in particular and adults in communities.
So Limpopo, bottom of the class, but Sethu is here saying it's still a good result if you look at the challenges?
No, it is. Limpopo still has got a lot of work that they have to really do and get right. You have a district like Vembe. It's one of the poorest districts, but it holds itself against your top performing systems. They're at 80%. So other districts like your Skukuni and Mopani can still do better. There's still lots of room for improvement in those districts. But all the same, they've improved, so they've not gone back, but they're not moving fast enough.
And Gauteng, top of the class, what can the other provinces learn from what Gauteng is doing?
And top of the class with many indicators, not only in terms of percentages. They had the highest bachelor's passes. They gave the country more than 40,000 bachelor passes. So they were leading in many indicators. They were leading in terms of support to struggling learners. They had special teams or camps or programs to support struggling learners. And I think that's what other provinces can do. For instance, Free State, without progress learners, they were at 90%.
Sure.
So they would have been number one. But because they didn't do as much as Gauteng did in supporting weak learners, they became the second. But they were leading. They'd broken the 90% ceiling.
This progressed learners issue, I was saying to the DG, I am sold because the rationale seems very strong to actually push students up if they fail in Standard 9. It's not going to bring standards down eventually.
And actually it has not helped them, because for me it's for the learners themselves. It has not helped them. If learners fail more than twice, they get discouraged and leave the system. So what we are saying to them, if they've not performed well, let them repeat the grade. But if they fail again, let's not take a chance and see them leaving the system. Let's quarantine them and let's give them dedicated support and see if we can save them. Because in any case, if we don't assist them, after they've failed more than once, they leave school.
And that retention rate is very important. But first, let's look at the overall pass rate, 78.2. So I think this is the same as 2013, which was the best since 1994.
Actually, this is the best because the 2013 was without your progress learners. Here, if we remove the progress learners, we're at 79.4. And as I say, 6% short, 6.6% short of my 80% target. It's actually the best ever because we have a percentage which has your progress learners. In 2013, we didn't have progress learners.
Okay, so this is our best result ever in democratic South Africa.
It's the highest we've ever achieved.
Are you very happy about that?
I'm very encouraged. I'm sure the sector can do more, but I also am very grateful that teachers, especially high school teachers, spend the days, the weekends, afternoon, really supporting learners. Whereas if everyone focuses on your foundation phase, your grade R, make sure that your kids can get the basic skills in grade R. Grade 12 will be a walk in the park. But because your foundation phase and your intermediate phase don't work as hard, high school teachers find themselves sweating it out to try and close those gaps that kids come up with from lower grades. And I really do hope that our primary schools even provinces will ramp up performance in your foundation phase. I'm grateful that from this year we're going to be rolling out ECD, from Beth, working with health and social development, to begin to pay attention to the development of kids from 9 months.
It's crucial.
It's crucial that we have early stimulation and we don't delay. We identify difficulties, children with special needs. If there are things that have to be corrected early in the year, they are identified earlier and rectified if they can be rectified. So that you don't only discover when kids are in grade 4 that they have a hearing problem, they have a hearing impairment, or they have a visual problem which has not been detected in lower grades. So we have to really do all we can as a country to ramp up performance in your early childhood development, in your foundation phase, and your intermediate phase. Then the system will be on a very healthy, solid foundation. Currently, we have to work extremely hard in the last phases because kids are leaving the system. We have to make sure that by the time they leave the system, we've given them the best. But the best starts on year 1.
If we look at the overall pass rate, I mean, it's improved dramatically since you took up this post. I think you came in and it was around 60%. What would you say to people who are wondering, we hear maybe the standards are just being manipulated. Maybe there aren't more people passing. We're just bringing the marks up where necessary.
No, far from it, far from it. Before I became the minister, I was also an MEC for education. And I knew we were struggling to stabilize the system. When I was appointed as minister, the first thing I did, which was what I had been crying about, was to deal with the curriculum, to create stability in the curriculum and deal with OBE and deal with the resourcing and dealing with just clarity about what teachers must teach, what must be assessed and how it should be assessed. And it's not 100% perfect curriculum, but there's lots of stability. Make sure that we really work with the teacher unions. We have a collaboration with teacher unions where they assist us to support teachers in schools. And those are some of the things that I think help to stabilize the system and enabled us to move forward. There is no way we can lower standards. It's not in our interest.
On that, because we see, oh, great, the best pass rate, but still a lot of talk about those TIMS standards, looking at science and maths, and we came bottom of the class. The DG addressed that today. Will you just speak to people who are concerned about those reports, that we are bottom of the class, maths and science, sort of middle-aged learners?
No, the problem is that you read headlines and not the proper report per se. If you go to teams, there were 45 countries that participated. Of those countries, only Morocco, Egypt, and ourselves from developing countries participated. We're not a Russia. We're not a first world country in many respects. We're a third world country. And in these teams, we go into benchmarking with the best systems in the world. We go and compete with your Chinas, your America, your England. We are benchmarking. So we're not going there because we think we can be number one as a new democracy that comes from such a fragile past in education. We're not going there to compete with Russia and see if we can be number one or to Russia. We're going there to benchmark ourselves against the best system. So we're not going to compete for number one or number two. It's to go and learn and say, how do those systems get it right? And we've learned a lot as a country that, we're a young democracy. Our education system is quite, our new democratic system is young. So we are going, those are benchmark tests and not competition. So people misquote and then they say we're number one in the world, as if 201 countries participated. Only 45 countries or sometimes 39 countries participate. And I think I had the DG when speaking to the DG. If you go to a marathon and finish your 60 Ks, you're not the slowest in the world. As long as you've completed the race, you get your T-shirt. So we have our T-shirts. We know where our weaknesses are. We're working on our weaknesses in comparing ourselves with the best systems in the world.
So I'm sure it's voluntary. Will we continue to have what he said was the courage to do those global benchmark tests?
And I think it's very important for us to, and there's lots of things that we really bring from those studies. Russia, for instance, it's your best system in terms of literacy in the world. You know what the results we got is that Russians, as people, parents, 85% of them are readers. 65% of them are advanced readers. South Africans, only 15% of South Africans as a population are readers. So then we even begin to understand that the problems are not in the school, our problems are in society. And therefore we run a reading campaign, encourage parents. So we pick up a lot to say, what makes Russia tick? It's not that we think we're going to be a Russia today. Most of our parents will go, I don't know, most if our parents even those that read don't read in South Africa. So which means we have to conscientize the nation to say, if we have to win as a nation, all of us have to pull in our homes. Our kids have to be encouraged. We have to buy our kids books as gifts. We have to read books to them, because the school will not be able to do all the things that are required to take it. And those are lessons we're bringing from these benchmark studies to say, how are they doing it? How are they making? What are the things we can do differently to improve? Those are benchmarking exercises, are not competition for number 1, 2, or 3.
So very difficult to bring up readers when your parents are not reading to you, are not reading themselves.
Even young parents themselves, all they do, they come back from work, they watch TV, ask them how many of them have read, even to their kids, how many of them have bought. Even their kids, Christmas time gives us, they'll buy them all sorts of breakable plastics and other things, buy them chocolates, and none of them will bring a book to their child as a way of encouraging reading culture. And a reading culture, it's not something that you acquire. It must be a habit. And you acquire habits through lots of things. And those are the things we bring from these benchmark exercises, not a benchmark, not competitions that South Africans then get depressed to say we're last in the world.
Yeah. Minister, we're running out of time, but the world is changing. You know, your department's saying this, that the world is changing. We have to keep up. What are we doing to prepare for a world where some of the skills needed now just will be redundant?
We're into it big time, and the president is leading the charge. For instance, we have started with even grade R to teach our kids to program from an early age. As I say, this year we're announcing that we're going to start rolling out a wall-to-wall ICT program in schools, starting with your rural, your poor schools, your spiritual schools, and we've given ourselves a clear time frame to say in the next 5 years we must have a comprehensive program in our education system. Despite all the challenges, without proper toilets and sanitations, we can't wait for some of our challenges to be resolved. We have to get our kids into the mainstream and prepare them for that 4th industrial revolution. So we're into it.
All right, Minister Angie Motshekga, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
You may leave the studio. We'll bring in the next guest while I speak to our viewers. And let's just recap. If you've just tuned in, results 2018 announced tonight. About 800,000 South African learners wrote those matric exams last year. The Minister Angie Motshekga is saying that this is the best result in democratic South Africa. The very best, even though 78.2% is on a par with what was achieved in 2013. She says the difference there is that there were no progressed learners. Now we have progressed learners still achieving 78.2%. So she believes this is the best since 1994. Progressed learners are learners who failed once in grade 11, pushed through to grade 12, and the department saying that policy is yielding results, and it's used in a lot of countries, because if you don't push the learners through, many of them get older, they simply give up. They're finding that the performance is actually better if they push those learners through. And we heard earlier from that department that we're even